This week on Indoctrination, we have part 2 of my conversation with Nicole Bernstein and Tamar Caspi, the founders of PeerK12, an organization that fights for Jewish civil rights in K-12 schools. We talk about the madness of responding to incidents post-October 7th and their work moving forward. Welcome to Indoctrination, the podcast that exposes and opposes radical ideology in K-12 schools and academia. Each episode, I talk with parents, students, and educators fighting for change. I'm Josh Weiner, your host. Join me and my guests as we shine a light on what's actually happening in K-12 classrooms and what we can do about it. Hey everyone, welcome to Indoctrination. I have part 2 of our podcast with the founders of PeerK12, Tamar Caspi and Nicole Bernstein. In our last episode, we talked with them about the founding of their organization and all the work that they had done pre-October 7th. And of course, we had a major escalation in issues in K-12 schools post-October 7th. So Tamar, Nicole, good to see you again.
Great to see you.
Thanks for having us again.
So my experience post-October 7th, especially looking back on it, is that a lot of this stuff seemed to be planned and coordinated to happen right after or during the attacks of October 7th. Tell us a little bit about your experience. What did October 7th look like for you, and what did the days following look like?
So Nicole and I were both working at a strategic communications firm on October 7th, and personally, we both had to take time. Needless to say, personally, both being Israeli, we both shock, awe, devastation, couldn't function. There was just, could not go to work. Not long after, it was a blessing that I was actually laid off. It was a blessing in disguise. And because we started getting phone calls from parents. And it was interesting because, as we all know, Israel was attacked and Israel didn't respond for weeks. And yet the Jewish and Israeli students in mainly middle and high schools were bearing the brunt already of the hate, and we hadn't even responded. We hadn't even defended ourselves yet. And we were already getting phone calls from parents frantic because of the hate that we were receiving, that their children that were receiving. And so we had to mobilize immediately. One of the things that we did was wrote letters to the superintendents, asking them to make statements to their districts, as they did following George Floyd, as they did following the rise in anti-Asian hate. And we did so because, similar to our resolutions that we had passed, we know that anti-Semitism is very nuanced. We know that what happened on October 7th was going to require very specific language. And so we wanted to make sure that this was done in a very sensitive manner. Needless to say, it was bungled badly. And I want Nicole had some very, very interesting conversations.
Well, for me, so the Saturday was, I think probably the most traumatic day in my life. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think it was for all Jews, but personally, I always talked about things like this as, in the past tense, right? As lessons from history to not be repeated. And then all of a sudden it was happening. And that caught me very, very off guard. In one sense, we had been dealing with all of this kind of indoctrination in schools for years and years and years. And we've known, all of us, that there are things, there are forces at play that want to demonize our people. But it was so visceral. And, but I don't think any of us really had a chance to sit in that trauma and just deal with it and mourn. When we say it was instant, like I started getting text messages on Saturday evening, California time, from parents who said that the vast majority of it was happening on social media, but like their kids were either seeing classmates of theirs posting things that were horrific, or their kids were being tagged in things that were horrific. And it was like, okay, I guess let's go. And I mean, Saturday evening, on Sunday, I had a school board member from my school district contact me that he had also received very upset calls, emails, and text messages from parents of students who were getting sort of harassed on social media. And this was like a really complicated issue because schools don't really know how to deal with anti-Semitism or hate on social media anyway. They have all these policies and stuff, like they don't get involved because they don't run the social media. They're not responsible for what kids are posting, blah, blah, blah. But this was like so different and so immediate and so heinous. And when I spoke to the board member, I said, listen, we also had a situation in my school district where we had a brand new superintendent. I mean, she had been on the job from like August 15th was her first day, I think, or something, right? So,
wow. She's really in for it, huh? Wow.
And my district, the reason why we had a new superintendent is because the superintendent before had said some incredibly racist things during an actual DEI training that was on Zoom and recorded. And so she replaced this superintendent who they had to get rid of because of, racially insensitive things. And so there was a lot of controversy around this. And so I told the board member, listen, I know I haven't had a chance yet to meet with the new superintendent, but if you could please organize a meeting, if she's open to it, I would like to try to get ahead of this as much as possible. And he did, and she took the meeting on Tuesday. So it was really, really fast. And I sat with her and I really felt like I had to start kind of from the beginning and give her a little bit of a background. But as Tamar was saying, we were like, listen, we've got to put a statement out. There are so many people affected by this. And it's really important to, just as had been done in this district and pretty much every other district. And by the way, lots of companies also had sent out, when George Floyd incident happened, and anti-Asian hate and, things like that. They send out public comments or, emails, or they post things. And she sat and she was like, okay, sure. Let me, I'll put something together. And I felt like she really understood the importance of it. And then the comments and the email started coming out from school districts, and it was pretty bad across the board, across the country. Right. I mean, it was like there was equivalency between, what happened to Israeli Jews and non-Jews, actually Israelis, versus Palestinians. There's always that, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, what we refer to as all lives mattering us. And it was especially difficult, I think, for me in my school district because I'd had that personal meeting, and I felt very confident that she was really understanding what was going on in the hearts and minds of Jews everywhere. If there's Jews on Mars, like they were hurting, right? And
yeah. And I also I just frame this, how difficult the situation is just looking from the outside. Like, we are talking about sort of equivocating what kind of response we expect from administrations because of the way that they responded to George Floyd. At the same time, we are going through a situation where there's an attack against Jews, the largest attack against Jews since the Holocaust. And we have a Black Lives Matter chapter in Chicago posting an image of a paraglider, which is one of the paragliders that came and massacred people at the Nova Music Festival. So this is a very it's a strange moment for administrators because they had been supporting this movement for the past, or making statements about this movement for the past several years in support of George Floyd. And now components of these movements are doing things that, are essentially in sort of support of terrorism.
Correct. My school district has a Black Lives Matter flag flying at the district office. And again, let's reiterate that Israel hadn't even responded yet.
Right.
We were still grieving. We were
bodies.
still counting. We were still identifying. We were still in shock. We were still getting terrorists out of our borders, our sovereign nation, and the hate started. And one of the things that I actually thought was really impactful was in many of the meetings that Nicole and I had with district members, school board members, superintendents, teachers, principals, was this is the question. Do you know what from the river to the sea means? No. They don't know. So here they are defending this phrase, saying it doesn't mean anything until you then ask them, do you even know what it means? They don't know what it means. You explain what it means, and then their jaw drops.
Yeah.
And they realize what they've been defending, and they realize they can't defend it anymore.
But the problem is that they have been defending it. And so now they've got to backtrack. But then if they do, they really felt like they were caught between different factions of their constituency, which I suppose in a way they were. But at the same time, like you said, Josh, the expectation is like, you put out a statement about George Floyd without qualifying it against, the suffering of whatever, right? Fill in the blank. Anti-Asian hate, et cetera, anything against the LGBTQ community. You don't say, and straight people too, right? It's like, you just don't do that except with Jews. And this was the conversation that, Tamar and I were scrambling and grabbing meetings. There were days where we would go from school district to school district to school district trying to meet with them to explain this. And it was, I think they were starting to understand the weight and the gravity of what they were going to have to deal with as administrators of districts.
I also felt like online there was this slow burn from like 2021 until this date of like trying to get people to use these phrases like globalize the intifada and from the river to sea. And then it was always a fight for us to try to reframe like, no, actually this means, from water to water, Palestine will be Arab. And that means washing it of Jews. Or same thing for the intifadas, explaining what the intifadas were and what that actually means to Jews. Now it's like a mad scramble because it's getting out there in mass.
Well, they were, that's what they planned.
Right. So when we're combating the ethnic studies movement, we have this whole, glossary of terms that we're trying to flip on its head, like decolonialism. That's been a huge word that they've been trying to hijack, for lack of a better phrase. That's been a word that they've been working on. And so that's a huge one. And now we're dealing with from the river to the sea. But there was one instance that happened during this time. So we're spending, Nicole and I also, we're on the phone, on our computers, on the TV all night long, watching Israel on Israel time, watching the news with our families. And during the day, we're on the phone with parents, with schools, with doing webinars, doing meetings with districts. And by the way, we're parents as well. We had jobs. And there was one day I'm on the phone with Nicole. It was about 2 weeks after the attack on Israel.
And during pickup, we usually talk during pickup because you're in the car. And so
And there were no kids in the car. I even telling the story, like my heart starts racing. I'm pulling up to the stoplight in front of my kids' school. My kids' school is to the right of me, and to the left of me is the Islamic Center of San Diego. And I'm at the stoplight, and I get a text, and I look down, and someone sends me a screenshot of a Facebook post that the imam of the Islamic Center, that his wife had posted, of babies with their throats slit by a Star of David.
Blood everywhere.
Okay, so just pause. We'll give a second just to put this image up for everybody to see. I just saw this image for the first time, and look, like, we're talking about all the things that we saw on October 7th and all the things that being in this work we've seen. This was like, it literally brings me to tears. Like, I'm like choking up right now. It's horrible.
You have to understand also, like, this was right after there were a lot of reports coming out of kibbutz Aza. Okay, so it's and Barry, and there were all of these reports of what had been done to Jewish Israeli babies and children, and how the children were murdered and mutilated. And it is in that context that Tamar gets this text, and we're talking, and I think it was mid-sentence, and she had, I think, the same reaction that you had. She was like, I think she used some other words though as well, but it was like,
but I gasped.
I was like, what happened? She's like, and I was like, what happened? She couldn't even speak for, I don't know. It felt like an eternity. Yeah.
I still don't have the words. It's still like, it's like, and I'm literally like 50 feet from this woman's place and her husband's place of business, where they spread this vitriol, where her husband stands in the pulpit, and he stood there and said that October 7th was justified. And his wife, why does she matter? She matters because she teaches at the University of San Diego, or she taught. We'll get to that in a second.
Used to.
She was on the community board of the Union Tribune, our major newspaper here, or was. We'll get to that. And she was on the San Diego Unified School District's district English learners committee. She was the chair of it, or used to be. We'll get to that. And the Ethnic Studies Advisory Council. That's why she matters. And her daughter is the head of the Palestinian youth movement in San Diego. That's why she matters. The husband is the imam of the Islamic Center in San Diego, the same Islamic Center where two of the 9/11 hijackers came from.
Wow.
At the time, he was also on the San Diego City Council
Human Rights Committee for the county of San Diego.
At the time.
My kid's school is not far away. So this is all the emotions I'm going through, sitting at the stoplight, going to pick up my kids, looking at this picture, and I am just, I'm shaking talking about it, you guys. And this is 2 years later.
And they were known entities to us. I mean, we had known
I've been tracking them
activities
the whole time
for many, many years, and they had worked through CARE to bring in a lot of, programs into various school districts and school sites. I mean, we've been dealing with this family way before October 7th, just so you understand. This was not something like, who is this person? Like, we knew exactly who it was. We know everything.
We've been watching her, which is why as soon as she posted, someone took a screenshot and sent it to me. So what did we do? This was...
Can we just unpack the image for just a little bit? Because I'm just like, I think there's a reason for the reaction. And it's just, there's so much packed into this. There's a Jewish star that is decapitating babies as a knife, which is just... It's just
a
horrible.
Blue star. The blood is red.
The blood is red.
Lots of blood.
We have libel,
and the rest of it
basically
is black and white.
We have libel, basically of Jews killing non-Jewish children, which is a medieval libel that is always charged against us.
Yeah.
We have at this time there's mutilation of babies happening, but it's also sort of projecting towards something that Israel is going to be accused of in the future.
Well, and also the sentence underneath it.
Oh yeah, the caption, "The devil is killing," is the caption.
I mean, look, that image was created for a reason. It was ready to go. She had it. It was, as you said.
So I just want to talk about this image a little bit because perhaps there's a reason that we all have such a vitriolic response to it. There's this blue star that is acting as a knife that's decapitating multiple babies, which I'm guessing is inferring that they're non-Jewish babies. So there's like this age-old anti-Semitic trope of blood libel going on. There's like stark blue and red blood here. All of this is going on during a time where there's a little bit of mixed reporting about beheading or mutilation of children that actually happened on October 7th. But I think what is also interesting to me is that this sort of, I guess, predicts forward into a lot of the accusations that end up being made against the IDF and Israel against Palestinian children that could not have necessarily been known at this point in time.
Foreshadowing.
Right, because again, right, Israel still at this point, I don't believe, had gone in. And again, the caption of it is "The devil is killing." So once again, we have Israeli babies that had been brutally murdered on October 7th. This Facebook post came out just a few weeks later. It was still the month of October. Israel had not gone into Gaza yet. And you're right, this was foreshadowing. And as we do know, even some of their worldwide army of people were, some of them posted before 6:29 a.m. in Israel on October 7th, because some of them like posted a little bit too soon. This was a big campaign, and we know that some of them posted a little bit prematurely, we saw with some of their social media. So this is a worldwide campaign, but it definitely does give you a reaction, and it's meant to. And what it did for us was it spurred us into action. And I'm not sure how it affected her people, but I know how it affected our people. So what we did was...
What was her name again? The imam's wife?
Lalih. Lalih Alali. So what we did was we instantly shared this, and we shared it with Stop Antisemitism. And it garnered more than 5 million views. We shared it with the authorities, and we shared it with all the local organizations. And then we also started local petition to remove her from all of her positions of influence. So she was, within days, removed from her position at the San Diego Union Tribune. She was removed from her position at the University of San Diego. And then we got people to go to the virtual board meeting for the San Diego Unified School District, DLAC, and ask for her to be removed as the chair. It's an elected position. The school board couldn't actually do anything because it's elected as their own board. So we all asked for her to be removed. Meanwhile, they immediately started their own petition, and they asked for her to stay on. The board did vote for her to be removed, so she was removed. Then we had to do another board meeting at the San Diego Unified School District, where we had to ask the board to affirm that removal. And so we did all of that. And that was to to ensure accountability, that somebody in that position cannot be posting something like that. That if you're on DLAC, if you are at the Union Tribune, if you are at a college where you are representing students across the county, across the district, you're representing all students. And when you're posting something like that, you are saying that you're not representing all students. And so there is accountability. Now, she still sits on the San Diego Unified School District Ethnic Studies Advisory Council. And that's something we're still working on. And that's something the school board is actually working on, and they can't figure out how to get her off. And that's something that almost 2 years later, that everybody's still trying to figure out.
Wow.
How to get her out of there. But so that was a big thing that happened in October 2023, and here we are, 22 months later. So much happened. It has been a game of whack-a-mole.
I mean, she wasn't. Yeah, she was on all of those. Her placement in each of those areas was not a fluke, right? I mean, we sort of hinted at this before, but one thing I always try to tell people is do not underestimate your opponent. They have a very strategic plan, and they have been implementing it flawlessly. We, however, on the other side, can't conceive of such an evil plan. And so we can't figure out how to fight it. Now, I say we, the general we, but we have been talking about this for a very long time. And we've been saying for a long time that you have to meet your opponent in the same ring, right? You can't be playing a different game or, playing in a different sandbox. Like you have to stand up and sort of push back on this head on. And I think that, we haven't been strategic in terms of placing our community members in all of these areas to kind of call out, some of these horrific things. It sort of lands in the laps of parents in the districts to deal with it. And I think one of the things that is most frustrating, at least, in our experience, is parents will come to us all the time and they'll say things like, we got to get her fired. It's like, you can't do that. The system is rigged against us, because they rigged it against us. Like, you can't get someone like this fired. Even someone like this doesn't get fired, doesn't get removed. They have thought in advance. They know what all of our moves were going to be, and they put safeguards into, bypass all of those types of demands. It's really hard and it's really frustrating.
And you're totally right, Nicole. There's no mistake why these people are in the positions that they're in. There's no mistake why everything seems similar, coordinated, why some of these posts were happening right before, during, or immediately after, or October 7th, or even before there was any response from Israel. And it was very difficult because the way that society was structured was to say, if you started to talk about these things or sort of call out the red flags in some sort of connected, coordinated, networked way, well, you're just a racist conspiracy theorist. You're Islamophobic. That you can't. This can't possibly be going on. And that kind of became like sort of the shield.
That's exactly. Yeah.
It's actually really interesting that you mentioned that, because Lalia actually 12, 13 years ago brought CARE into San Diego Unified, trying to push forth an Islamophobia resolution or some kind of proclamation about how they were going to teach or not teach 9/11 because of Islamophobia. And the district was sued. But ever since then, CARE has been in our district. And so when October 7th happened, we then had a student at a high school campus in our district running around with a Palestinian flag as a cape, yelling about from the river to the sea.
Draped in keffiyehs, of course.
Yes, she's draped in a keffiyeh. She's Muslim. She's in a hijab. She's got stickers on her school laptop. and she's a spokesperson for CARE. So when she's a 15-year-old actually at the time she was 14, freshman, spokesperson for CARE, flown around the country. And so a granddaughter of Holy Land 5.
Wow.
Yes, her grandfather
Convicted.
was deported after he was released from prison. And so whenever you say we have a problem with this student, who comes to her defense? CARE, and the school district
Backs down.
So have this coordinated campaign where we have people that have been put in place for years, and we're playing whack-a-mole, but we're also playing catch up, and we are so far behind. We are not coordinated. We are a fractured community. We are not. We have our funding is all over the place because people don't understand and they're territorial. And so Nicole and I are over here just trying to help the parents protect their children and trying to help the teachers protect their students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also this somewhat new way that they're going about this, which is anti-Palestinian racism, and actually integrating it or trying to into discrimination policy or into classroom or homeroom teachings. This actually started in Canada, and it basically says, for example, if you challenge or give a different or alternative perspective or really facts on the Nakba narrative or any other Palestinian narrative, that you are being racist against Palestinians or Islamophobic against Muslims. So I'm sure this is part of the whack-a-mole that you're playing.
It is. I think what's so crazy and really hard for us to deal with is that example that you gave is actually only the latest example in a string of historical things that have been happening, I think, for the last 50 years, where you have something that is set up in order to oftentimes set up by Jewish community representatives to bring awareness or protection to Jews. And I'll give, the UN as a great example. Like, hey, at the UN, after World War II, they saw what could happen, not just horrible things that happen in every war, but the systemic extermination of an entire people. And so you set up this, human rights, council. Well, that was turned against the Jews. You've got the word genocide was invented really for that and Holocaust. And now it's being turned against us. And so when you have IRA, which is, again, because anti-Semitism is so nuanced, it's like, well, is criticizing Israel anti-Semitism, which is what they say. And it's like, no. And we talk about this all the time. Like, if you've ever been around an Israeli, literally the national sport is criticizing the Israeli government, right? It's that you're criticizing policies and whatever, but that's not what IRA really defines. It's your anti-Semitism is singling out, Jews or Israel and wanting it gone from this planet. And that, I think, is really the difference. And people used to say to us, oh, well, can you imagine them saying that about the US? Like, that's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, actually, that's what ethnic studies teachers talk about all the time. It's not just about Israel. It's about America. And so all of this, anti-Palestinian racism, it comes from the same place that all this other stuff. They're using Western values, Western liberal values against us and co-opting everything, turning it inside out into something that it's not. And people are just so afraid to kind of stand up to this that it just perpetuates. It's terrifying.
So I imagine, like, we have Palestinian flags in classrooms, either teachers or students. We have teachers and students wearing keffiyehs. We have probably all sorts of things going on social media that are bleeding in and outside of the classroom. Is both of your hair just on fire? Like, is it just constant response? And how
gray hair? Lots of
every time we think we've seen the worst of it, something else happens. We're like, oh, nope, actually, there's the worst. And then the next thing, oh, nope, actually, there's another one,
I'm sure ceasefire resolutions too. You probably dealt with some of these.
And what's interesting was that we had ceasefire resolutions at some district levels, but we also got brought into the city and county levels because our legacy orgs weren't built for that. And that's not what they were doing. And so they were like, well, you guys kind of know what you're doing. And so we were brought into that to mobilize people. And now, luckily, we have wonderful partners that stand with us in IAC that have now mobilized to do that, which is wonderful. But at the time they had it. And so we were doing that. We had mobilized people to go to city council meetings and to go to the county board and to say, like, why are you
even entertaining this,
wading into foreign policy? Like, let's just deal with the mess in our own backyard. Like, why are you even doing this? We were having not only hostage posters ripped down, but then disgusting stickers put up, or spray painting or chalk, stuff like that. We have a wonderful House of Israel at Balboa Park here that was getting vandalized. We were having, what else was happening?
Do you know what it felt like to me? It was like, so a lot of people were shocked at all of a sudden, all these things are happening. And Tamar and I were like, we have been explaining this to everyone for 5 years. Like, this is what's going to happen. This was going to happen. And people are like, oh, that'll never happen here. I'm like, that's what my grandparents were told. Okay. It could never happen here. Right. And it's like, why isn't everybody seeing the same pattern over and over again? And then things started happening with college campuses. That also was like a trickle down for us. And it's not like all of a sudden, all these college kids like jumped up one day. To me, it feels like, when you see those zombie movies, where, like the young lady is walking down the street by herself and all of a sudden, all of the skeletons jump out of their graves and chase this, it's like all of a sudden, that's what it felt like. Like all of a sudden, all of these students on college campuses and students in high school and teachers in high school just jumped up one day and decided to be super anti-Israel with all fully coordinated images and words. And yeah, it was.
I think about the response that you had to put up before October 7th, and it was a lot of work on you guys, but I'd imagine that all of a sudden you also had a lot of parents that were coming with you to help. Right. So that had to have made it at least more possible to deal with.
Listen, it was somewhat easier to mobilize, but like, we didn't want to be right. We didn't want to be proven right. Like, I would have loved nothing more to have been like, oh, like we were wrong. Sorry. One of the things that we were invited to DC to ask Congress for a hearing on anti-Semitism K-12. And one of the things that Nicole and I did was we went to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and we went down to the United States portion of it where we also saw the propaganda part and where we saw how it happened. Yeah. And that is what people are missing about the Holocaust education here in the US. And that is, it's not about just, yes, it's genocide. Yes, it's 6 million people. Yes, it's horrible. Yes, it's never again. How did that happen? And how do we prevent that from happening again? Because that's what's happening right now. And that's what the part that people are missing. It's been happening for decades. Like the ethnic studies movement is the repetition. And that's what people are missing. This indoctrination has been happening for decades. And this October 7th is a cog in their wheel. And the part that this last 2 years and what we're seeing, especially here, US, Canada, France, UK, this is all part of it. The college encampments, this is all part of it. How the world is turning on us, how the media is turning on us and yet saying that we control the media.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
The irony is befuddling.
I talked with Karen Feldman about this a lot. She's in New York City.
We work with her.
We know her well, yep.
Love her. But this is the part that people don't get. It's that the way that they work to divide us and then make it morally righteous to be against us. The divided part that they've demonized, and then you can kind of grab the part that, you know, is the Jew that's acceptable and sort of bring them into your camp until there's no use for them anymore. And it's the moral part that makes it really hard for people to recognize, because they really get caught up into the situation to say, no, I'm doing the right thing because these people really are the devil. They're committing these horrible things, and this is the right side to be on. I think we get framed the Holocaust in a way where it's like, well, obviously these people are evil. They're killing a bunch of people. They're putting them into camps. It really wasn't that obvious, though. And I don't think we capture that really in Holocaust education.
We don't at all, actually. And it's really hard. I mean, one thing also, a phrase that is that we repeat all the time, you know, because they're like, oh, well, we're going to do some anti-bias training. And, you know, we're like, well, that's what we've been doing for 80 years. Like, maybe let's try something different now because it's not working. And it's also a numbers game. I mean, let's say in a wild and crazy dream that the 15 million Jews on this planet were united in one message. Can't even fathom that. I don't know what that looks like, but let's just say, okay, we're still only like, what, 0.2% of the global population? Or is that less? Like, we don't have the numbers. And I think that, you know, one of the things that's the hardest for us about all of this is, and I think we talked about it, you know, in our first recording, is that anti-Semitism in schools and curriculum and in city councils and, you know, whatever, it's really just the first manifestation of this re-educating or replacing American value system with something else entirely, something that is the exact opposite. And, you know, I see a lot of parallels between Jewish way of thinking and Jewish ideas and the United States of America. You know, you've got this focus on the individual, but then also the collective, right? It's not like one or the other. It's both. It's you as an individual within the greater, you know, community. You've got this idea of consent of the governed. You know, that was a central idea when Moses came down with the, you know, the 10 Commandments. He asked the people, do you agree to this, right? That had never been done before. You've got separation of powers, right? King Saul actually was the first to say, well, okay, the people want a monarch or king, but we don't want to be like everybody else and have absolute power. So he had judges and he had prophets and he had other people, and there was a separation of powers. And these concepts are so key and critical to Western civilization that it's obvious that when you try to break down Western civilization and American values, the first thing to fall is going to be the foundation. If you can get rid of the foundation of that, then the rest of it will follow. And I mean, you got to look at how many college students were just blindly following those protests, didn't even know what river, what sea. They're like, I don't know, I've got this, you know, poster and someone gave it to me and it was like a Jewish star in a trash can and it said, you know, help keep the world clean. How does that happen? Like Tamar was saying, well, you do what Hitler did. You do what Mao did. You replace the education system with indoctrination, and within a generation, you're good to go.
Yeah. And I feel like we were just like trying to mourn what had happened and also reacting from like October until like January, February, March. And I think just starting into January, February, March, people were starting to understand and realize like, whoa, this seems really coordinated, especially in May when the campus encampment started happening and all the tents looked the same on all the college campuses. Like, what's going on here?
Oh, and the kids were using pamphlets that had written by, produced by, printed by the Hamas communications
Hamas
branch.
media office. Yeah.
Like, it says it on the pamphlet. What don't you get?
So,
by the way, I don't actually feel like I've mourned. I don't know about you, but like,
no.
Right.
For me, in my emotional state, it's still October 8th for me. Like, I have never really been able to mourn this. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I think so many of us we just jumped into action. And even
our hostages are not home,
it's like
No, I just started reading, or I'm in the middle of reading Democracies and Death Cults, and the beginning of the book is really Douglas Murray's recount of October 7th. And I agree. Just reading that, it takes you right back to that minute. And it's still so raw. It's not something that I've dealt with. And I think that's true for all of us who work in this and beyond. But like, it just felt like all we could do is react and be shocked for the first few months. Like, what do you guys do to stop playing whack-a-mole and start to put together some sort of, I guess, cohesive strategy to combat this?
One of the things that we realized, we talk about the tents and the pamphlets. Then we got that congressional hearing for Harvard, MIT, and Penn. And we said, wait a second, guys. This didn't start. They didn't wake up, like you guys said, they didn't wake up and say, hey, we decide that we're going to be anti-Israel. No, they were indoctrinated in K-12. So we went with Parents Defending Ed, we went to DC and we asked Congress for a hearing on anti-Semitism in K-12. We received that hearing. That was in March 24. We flew back for the hearing in May 24. And we had the hearing with Berkeley, Philly, and New York.
No, it was Berkeley, Montgomery County, Maryland, and New York City.
Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. Philly came later.
So, yes. And it was then that we realized this is political. And the way to beat this is two-pronged, political and legal. And yes, we need to play whack-a-mole because the students in the classroom deserve to feel safe and protected. And so we do need to continue with the incident response. But in order to continue with the incident response, we need to use the legal precedents that exist. And so we need to implement and have accountability with the legal, the ed code that exists and the laws that exist, Title VI, for instance. And educating teachers and parents about the ed codes that exist, giving them the tools to either do it on their own or to do it with them, keeping the districts, like letting them know that they're put on notice, that we know the ed code. We know
our rights.
We're going to let you know that we know that what our parent rights are. The teachers know what their rights are. Then, of course, we have the teacher unions, and the teachers need to know what their rights are as well in regards to the unions. And we'll get into that. But in regards to us as parents, it is it's politics and lawfare. And so we are teaching parents what their rights are, what the ed code does to protect them, what the law does to protect them. And we hold their hand, we train, and then we have the politics in regards to school board. And so it is, what is the makeup of a school board? For my school board, for instance, all 5 of them are teacher union endorsed. Nicole's school board is a 2-3-3-2. It splits. So there's actual discourse in Nicole's school board, which is really nice that they actually have discussions about things.
Yeah, but the majority is still teacher union. And so they'll have a really deep discussion, and you see that maybe there's going to be the moral, the ethical decision made. But then, of course, it's not, because they go into these meetings knowing what their vote is going to be already. And so I think, probably the hardest part is laws exists that are not being implemented. There's no oversight for those who are not implementing. There's no consequence for districts that are not protecting Jewish students the way that they protect other students. And you start to see the Sharansky's 3Ds manifest in every way possible.
Double standard, delegitimization, and demonization. Yes. Yeah.
And it's really easy to apply those 3. It's so easy to apply those 3 once you say them. I just want to clarify, when I say teachers unions, we're not anti-teacher. We are super pro-teacher. But teacher unions created by Jews, by the way,
yes.
Are there for a reason. It is there to protect teachers in regards to benefits and salaries, for collective bargaining. But what has happened is that the teacher unions are now becoming political tools. And what we're seeing here, for instance, in California, is that the teacher unions are endorsing candidates, and then the candidates are now, when they get elected, are beholden to the teacher union stance. One of the things that we
this is happening in Chicago. This is happening pervasively in Chicago.
It's happening across the nation.
Our mayor, Brandon Johnson, received funds from the Chicago Teachers Union, as well as Cicho Lopez and Rosana Rodriguez, who are Democratic Socialists. Yes.
Yep. Actually, the Democratic Socialists and the teacher unions, I mean, again, when you talk about a really impressive strategy, their strategy was always political. You know, they knew that in order to implement their political strategy, they needed to be able to, retrain or change the value system of future voters, right? And where are future voters? K through 12. Second they get out of, senior year, they're voting age. And that is, I think, the biggest miss on our side, above all, is the Jewish community has always approached these issues from an educational perspective, but this is not an educational problem. It's political, 100% political.
Yeah, so this is really important, because if you think about changing people's value system and whether you can actually utilize the law to make a difference, if your value system says that Title VI is protecting people based on, Title VI says that you're protected based on protected classes, and that should be no matter what subclass you are within that protected class. But what we've taught people through ethnic studies is the change in the value system to say that really, when we're protecting people by ethnicity, we're only talking about the ethnicities who have
oppressor.
They're oppressed based on the historical inequities or the current inequities that exist in society. We're not really talking about white people, Jewish people, other people of European descent. We could get into a whole conversation about what white actually means. But if that's the way that you interpret the law, then you've created a situation where Title VI doesn't apply to Jewish people. So now you basically have open season on Jewish people at schools. So this is
So Josh, let me ask you one question though here on this, right? So imagine, that value system change that's been happening, and let's say it started probably right around, let's say 1973, 74, 75. What happens when you have the students graduating from high school, then going to college and getting even more of it, and then going on, let's say, to have careers in law and then become judges? Okay. Now, judges are, appointed, and let's say you have judges appointed, for example, here in California, who are completely bought into that new ideology, that new value system. Then you have Jewish families all across California being forced really to litigate in order to have their civil rights protected in their public schools. The judge is bought into this new anti-American, anti-capitalism, anti-merit, anti-Jew, anti-democracy value system. And they're like, well, there's no way that you could be discriminated against because you're Jews, and Jews are rich and wealthy and control everything. So case dismissed. Boom. Next.
And then we're going through appeals, and then we're going hopefully up to the Supreme Court. And how long did that take to protect someone's civil rights, right?
Meanwhile, my kids are in school every single day. What about them? What about other people's kids?
I think, too, something that we learned really quickly is we thought about this issue and said, okay, well, schools are a local issue. This is district by district. We have to really empower the parents district by district, which, by the way, is a totally unscalable way to go about things, as you guys all know. But what we found out quickly is this is really, truly multi-stakeholder. You talk about the universities who are teaching the colleges of education, the teachers unions who are politicizing things. We have the state boards of education who come down with academic standards or requirements that actually are putting politicized ideas into classrooms. Then we have the federal government who has some play in federal funding for certain things and for a lot not. But if you look at most schools, like their federal and state funding, it's somewhere between like federal funding, maybe 2 to 4%, and state funding, if you add it, maybe up to 10 to 12%, which is a big deal, but it has limited impact. And then like, I'm
and how are they using that
missing
funding?
some facets. And how are they using that funding? So in order to actually combat this, it takes a huge ecosystem of organizations working in totally like multiple points of power.
Total synchronicity.
Yeah, right.
Totally achievable. Yeah, no. But actually that, and if you look at every one of those layers that you just mentioned, if you look at who is sitting at the table of decision makers into those, there's a common thread. And once you start to map it out and you start to identify what that common piece is, you really start to understand the overwhelming task ahead of us. If the teacher unions that have all of the capital because of dues are the ones behind teacher credentialing, curriculum development, instructional quality commissions, right? In every state, who sits in all of those? Teacher union
major ones I missed, by the way. Yeah.
Huge, right? But it's not just that, because there are amazing people in teacher unions as well. But the problem is that the amazing people don't volunteer themselves for, additional projects or work, or, they don't really like focus on working their way up the ladder, the leadership ladder, so to speak, inside teacher unions to get to the top rungs, because they are actually really concerned about their local districts and their local schools. They're the ones doing the real work of teacher unions.
They're worried about their students learning.
And their teachers, right? Well-being, which is what they should be doing. It's the people who know in advance that the actual goal is to get to the top of that ladder so that you have political power at the teacher credentialing, at the curriculum, at the state legislature, at the district level, at the federal level. Listen, when I was at APAC still, one of the things that I kept hearing was, well, there's only 4 or 5 of, the squad. And I was like, but don't you see what's happening on college campuses? And this was back in, well, it started in 2005, but for me, it was like, we've seen now what's happening on college campuses. And you want to tell me that all of those college students, even if they're not affiliated with, apartheid week and all those horrible things, they're walking by those things and they're seeing it. So you've got the repetition happening. They see it over and over again. You repeat something, you repeat a lie often enough, it becomes the truth. Goebbels taught us that. Hitler taught us that. Mao taught us that. You've got a situation where you are matriculating Americans who, whether they know what they're voting for or not, is kind of irrelevant. It's like, you see a sign of a name outside, during election time, enough times you're like, you go to the ballot and you're like, oh, I know that name.
Name recognition.
Name? Yeah. Okay. Jamal Bowman, for example, member of Congress in New York, ousted. Thank you, APAC. But what did he do before he was in Congress? He was a principal of a high school. And then before that, he was a history teacher. And he made his way up through the teacher union and was identified by the local DSA and said, that's our guy. And that is not an unusual case. And so when people tell us all the time that, Congress is overwhelmingly pro-Jewish, pro-Israel, a term which I, by the way, don't even really like, but that was true before. And within the next 10 years, that will not be true anymore. And the reason is because this political strategy has been implemented to perfection, I have to say. And we're paying the price for that now.
And guess who Zohran Mamdani wants to make his chancellor if he wins mayor? Jamal Bowman.
Jamal Bowman.
Yeah. So it all comes full
not
circle.
By accident.
Not by accident.
All politics is local.
When we did the anti-Semitism resolution in San Diego Unified, one of the first call-ins against a resolution affirming the rights of Jewish students and condemning anti-Semitism was the head of our local teacher union, who is a Jewish man and a member of JVP, but he was the head of the teacher union. The people against the current and Assembly Bill 715 in California is the California Teachers Association. We know, one of the things that that PeerK12 was involved in was when the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, when they spent last summer, all of their annual bills were anti-Israel. Why? When your test scores, when your student learning scores are in the toilet, why are you spending so much time worried about a country halfway around the world that has nothing to do with you? And so we worked, you mentioned Karen Feldman, we worked with NYCPS and we worked with Jews in School, and we put together a campaign and a media campaign, and we brought media attention to their resolutions, and we got New York Post coverage, and all of a sudden, I think there were like 7 bills. Most of them got put down, tabled, watered down. Just, we brought attention to it. No one pays attention. That's one of the big things that we've found over the last couple of years, is that on the ballots, people are not paying attention to the school board bubbles when they're filling in their ballots. People were not paying attention to the ballot initiatives either when it comes to funding. People are not paying attention to what the NEA and the AFT were voting on. So we now are paying attention. So when the NEA was voting on stuff this past summer, and we now have Jewish caucuses at all of these different unions that are saying, whoa, wait a second. And they're opening their books and they're like, wait, why are you so hyper-focused on Israel? What is your obsession with us? And so now we help them to highlight these things. Right now, the CTA, California Teachers Association here, is saying that they haven't heard of anti-Semitism. Again, the head of the CTA here is a Jewish man who says that he hasn't heard that there's been any issues with anti-Semitism.
But you know what he has heard, though? He has heard from teachers all across California that are being censored and silenced in classrooms because they are no longer allowed to speak ill of Israel. So here comes the, oh, we can't talk about Israel because, Jews are racist against us, or, whatever. And
we can't talk about Israel the way we want to, which, by the way, they're not allowed to anyways. Their opinion is, they're not allowed to address their opinion or to share their opinion. And B, when they do share something, controversial issues, is a board policy that is all across the state of California that they need to share both sides of anything that falls under controversial issues. So all of these things are already policies that exist that the teachers must abide by, that they just don't seem to care about. So when we're saying in these new assembly bills that we just are reiterating, they're not new. You're not allowed to share your opinion. And when you bring up something controversial, you need to share both sides. And oftentimes, by the way, both sides infers that there's only 2 sides. There's oftentimes more sides than that, that you need to share that. And I don't really know. I have 2 high schoolers. I don't really even know where this topic would come up in any of their classes right now that would fit into 50 minutes of their day that they would actually be able to have a thoughtful conversation on. It is not really a topic that could be done in a very thoughtful, balanced manner. It's really important that it be done so in a thoughtful way if it's going to be done at the high school level.
Yeah. I mean, we would think that this would be something that you would talk about in history class or, poli-sci class or something like that. But the point is not actually to have a good and balanced discussion about this topic. The point is to find ways to drip it into every subject. And in Cupertino, we had an example of this where the science class in one of the high schools had an assignment where the students needed to determine how much of global warming and the depletion of the ozone layer was caused by Israel's bombing of Gaza. Students, go, right? And you look at that and it's like, what? We saw it in things that are even no one would ever think to look for. You have heritage nights or culture celebration nights, in elementary schools, which is supposed to be everyone bringing, their culture's food or music or, whatever, to this evening, and you share it with everybody. And they allow, students in elementary school to do, if you have like a national dance or if you have something you can do. And what we started to see over and over again, also before October 7th, but really heavily afterwards, is these culture nights being taken over with Palestine tables and booths that were handing out what I would say are age-appropriate little pamphlets that had, like that little drawing. I can't remember what they named the drawing. And it's like word search, genocide in Gaza. And, so it's like a word search that's for little kids. There was like one of those things where you have to, go through the maze to help the Palestinian child escape from the IOF, not the IDF. You have example after example of this happening.
Well, don't forget the color in the map of Palestine, and it was an outline of Israel.
Age appropriate. It was a little pamphlet for little kids.
How
do you fight back?
We had Stevenson High School in the Chicago area. They did it was like a cultural night, and I think the Palestinian booth was the only booth taking donations, but they were taking donations to an organization that was tied back to Hamas. I know in Abigail Schreier's The Kindergarten Intifada article, she talks about, and Barry Weiss in the podcast shows the pie chart of Israelis versus Palestinians killed throughout the Israel-Palestinian conflict. This isn't just an Israel-Palestine thing, though. Like, this is actually something that they do around the oppression narrative. So I've seen a classroom example where it was one of these math problems about, I'm going with my mom to an amusement park, and Jimmy and his mom are going 40 miles per hour. They're 80 miles per hour away. You know how this math problem goes, right?
The math word problems were the bane of my existence. But yes.
We don't need to solve the problem first. We need to talk about who in the class had the privilege to go to an amusement park growing up. And we have a conversation about privilege instead of a conversation about math. So interestingly, this is a problem that, yes, absolutely, Israel has been caught in the middle of it, but it's something that's been pervasive in STEM classes, actually, even, that it doesn't even make sense to start talking about these concepts. You guys I'm sure have seen this as well.
We've seen it in all the classes, and of course also in yearbook. So in yearbook, it depends. Every yearbook class has a different yearbook provider, but in multiple yearbook providers, what they do is there are some stock pages that are sent, and you get to choose the stock pages you use. And they were provided with stock pages of what happened in the past year in the news. And they chose these pages that had a very biased accounting of what happened in Israel. And there is an advisor, though. That's the issue, is there is a yearbook advisor, and the yearbook advisor is not saying, hey, wait a second, that doesn't look right. And then when the seniors who get to put a quote that is not correct, where's the yearbook advisor saying, hey, that doesn't look right? We were brought in, one of the school districts that we work in very closely, that's been a wonderful school district to work with, Sweetwater. They had one of their schools where the newspaper published a cartoon that was super biased and problematic. And I immediately called the superintendent, who connected me with the principal, and they immediately, I'm a former journalist and doing this work. So I kind of bridged that gap between a school newspaper and this anti-Jewish work. And so they brought me in, and I had the Jewish club there talking to the journalism club about why this newspaper cartoon was inflammatory and putting them at risk. And it was a senior that drew it. And we talked about why he drew it. he drew it because of what he was seeing on his social media. So I had him show me his social media, his TikTok, his Instagram. His algorithm was skewed to show him all of this anti-Israel propaganda. And I showed him mine. Now, I also have a fake account because I want to see what they're seeing. And this is something I do because I need to know what the other side is seeing so that we can be better educated to know how we're going to deal with students, because otherwise we're being naive here, right? So I'm fully aware of this because I'm an adult with a fully formed brain. They're preying on these students, knowing TikTok is really, really like they know what they're doing here, and they're preying on their students. So I'm looking at his algorithm and I'm like, no wonder he drew this horrible cartoon that pitted Israel and the US as the bad guys, Israel and the US. And I asked them, I said to this entire journalism staff, I said, do you know what happened on October 7th? None of them knew. I said, do you know about the Bebas babies? None of them knew.
Listen, I mean, do you guys remember, this was after October 7th, but all of these young Americans started posting on TikTok. They had somehow gotten a hold of Osama bin Laden's letter about why he planned the attack on America. And they were like, he's got some good points. And, listen, America sort of had it coming and I can't believe. And I mean, it was like a national security issue. And it did get escalated, but that's a perfect example of this changing the American value system and changing how young Americans think about America in order to destroy it. When you've got kids who weren't alive when 9/11 happened, you've got CARE working in every single school district to teach about it in a way that does not mention Muslims or terrorists, which I don't know how you do, but they figured out a way. And then you have TikTok algorithms and social media feeding this ideology shift, and hundreds of American students and young Americans going and saying that they believe that Osama bin Laden was justified. We know what that sounds like. We understand what justified. We know what globalized the Intifada means, and that's what it means. So we're up against all of these things.
What I'm wondering is where are the adult Democrats in the room to say, like, this is unacceptable and this does not represent democratic values? And my sense is that we're so worried about the fear-mongering that's happening on the right, the fascism that's happening over there, that anything that happens over here just doesn't really matter, or it's not really worth as much of my time as focusing on what happens over there. And I want to take this conversation into the Jewish community, because I think like this is something that we have a really difficult time with, is how polarization politicizes issues that we should really be together on, but we cannot get together on because of the things that are going on at the federal level and also the local level.
Partisanship.
That have been heavily the partisanship. So how is that manifested for you guys? How difficult has it been to get the Jewish community together and focused on the same things? And also talk to me about the Jewish organizations, like the mainstream Jewish organizations, the legacies, if you will, and the new Jewish organizations. What difficulties has this brought in?
Oh my gosh, this is like our main fight, actually. Forget about the bad guys. Like,
yeah.
And this is before you even say it, that's such a problem. Like, the other side, they are lockstep in.
Yeah,
we're here to delegitimize America and Israel and the West, and anything that goes towards that, we're supportive. We'll sign on. We're together. We are. We're so worried about. Meanwhile. We're so worried about getting us all into one direction, we can't even focus on what the other side is doing in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah. The Jewish community is so worried about offending each other and offending donors, and that we're
fitting in.
Yeah. PeerK12 was invited to have a seat at the table when the local Jewish organizations created an anti-Semitism roundtable. So we are one of the
October 7th.
No, pre-October 7th. And we continue, right? I believe so.
It was post.
Was it?
We'll fact check it and put it up.
We'll fact check it. Look, I mean, again, it's still October 8th in my brain. So
right. It doesn't. Yeah. But we have a seat at that table. We meet, it was bi-monthly because of the rate of anti-Semitic instances. We've actually ramped it up to monthly meetings. And so we're the only grassroots org that is at that table. That said, we're not really included in the conversations. The legacy orgs have conversations but then we are having our own conversations because the parents kind of come to us. One of the big things that we'll note is that, the ADL prior to October 7th was not paying attention to anti-Semitism on the left. And we were screaming about it. And then Jonathan Greenblatt, to his credit, has now said, oh yeah, there's anti-Semitism on the left. We're like, no shit, Sherlock. We've been trying to tell you that, and you weren't willing to recognize it before, and we're paying the price because of that.
The internal Jewish conversation is, you know what, like you said, Josh, there's such a difference between how our opponents are approaching this and how we're approaching this. And one thing that Tamar and I have been saying to people for many, many years is, first of all, we know that everyone should know this, that Jew hate is not a partisan issue because it's everywhere and it manifests slightly differently depending on which side of the aisle that you're at. Although I would argue that in the last year, it looks exactly the same to me and I can't actually tell the difference. So when Marjorie Taylor Greene says something and Ilhan Omar says something, I can't tell what, if you just show me the quotes, I wouldn't be able to tell you which one said what.
The horseshoe is touching. Yeah. It is not like kinda, it is.
Yeah. But we've always said, that anybody who is sitting in a position of political power, so for example, school board members or state assembly members or members of Congress, when they have a position of political power, we will need to be meeting with everybody because we do actually need everyone, regardless of their party, to understand what our community is dealing with and be able to come to solutions that are bipartisan or nonpartisan solutions. However, we were sort of pushed aside by the organized legacy community from the very beginning. The second resolution that we passed at my school district, San Dieguito, the champion for that resolution on the school board happened to be someone who self-identified as a Republican. Now, when he heard all of the things that were happening to Jewish students in the district, he was like, well, I've never heard of any of these issues. And we're like, yeah, that's kind of the problem because they don't get escalated and they don't get taken care of. And he really got it. But because he self-identified as a Republican, we were shut out. Like, while we had the support of the entire Jewish community the first time in San Diego Unified, because everyone there is, a teacher union Democrat.
Yeah.
On the board, they were on board with it. But the minute that we were working with someone who identifies as a Republican, it was like we were persona non grata.
I just want to say the reason that Nicole's using that language is because school board is supposed to be nonpartisan. So that's the reason Nicole's using that language. School board is not supposed to be partisan. So the reason that we're saying self-identified is because when you are on the ballot, there is not a D or an R or anything. And so when we're saying self-identified, what you are seeing is typically, if you see that somebody is endorsed by the teachers union, you can typically assume that they are a Democrat.
Yeah. Or a communist. Socialist. Anyway, when we went to DC, we worked. First of all, parents defending ed were fantastic in terms of setting up meetings and with members of Congress, but all of those meetings it happened to be with Republicans. Now, the head of the House Ed Committee, the chair was Republican. And so she chaired that meeting that we had. when we went back, we tried to expand, and we actually did. We worked with JFNA and CAM, Combat Antisemitism Movement, and we were able to get just as many Democrats to meet with us. So we really wanted to have the mix. But that first time when we went in March to ask Congress to have these conversations, we were not given a meeting by the chair of the Senate Ed Committee, who happens to be Bernie Sanders. So when you talk about the political divide within the Jewish community, you had a group of like 15 or so Jewish moms from across the country flying out to Washington, D.C. to meet with our elected officials, elected officials. The chair of the House committee, who happened to be Republican, not only took that meeting, but had agreed to commit to having a hearing that same year. The chair of the Senate Ed Committee wouldn't even meet with 15 Jewish moms from across the country to talk about anti-Semitism in our kids' schools. Bernie Sanders. So, that if that's not indicative of the struggle that we have, I don't know what is. And one of the things Tamar and I have said from day one is we have got to stop in this country considering ourselves Jewish Democrats or Jewish Republicans or Jewish independents or Jewish libertarians. We're Jews. And the sooner you start to realize that, the better off this whole conversation is going to be. Because when you see things like Harvard and UCLA being investigated by the federal government for blatant anti-Semitism against its Jewish students, and you have an entire portion of Jews in this country who self-identify as Democrats condemning that just because we have a Republican administration in the White House is, to me, the biggest shanda of all. That, and I'm sorry to be so blunt, that's an embarrassment. When you have Black students or Asian students, if that had happened, if the Biden administration had come in and, slapped down a $1 billion fine on UCLA for discriminating against Black students, do you know who the first people to celebrate that would be?
The Jews.
Our community. Yeah.
100%.
So what? Discrimination against Jewish students, you're not going to support just because it was a Trump administration decision? That to me is disingenuous, and it's more harmful, in my opinion, than all of our haters combined. Really. It's the only thing that's ever brought us down.
Yeah. I mean, I had a very similar experience. I went to Congress to lobby when DePaul University was testifying, and we were only able to get one Democratic meeting. Everything was Republican, and my experience in that room was just so weird because, I've mostly been on the left my whole life. I have mostly voted blue, but to be there and see, look, there was politicization of anti-Semitism on both sides for sure. But the amount of politicization that happened on the left versus the right was astounding to me. And like Ilhan Omar going in there and talking about Charlottesville was just like, I could not, to even be in the same room with her was like, can't even handle this. But like,
that happened too in the hearing that we went on May 8th in 24 about anti-Semitism in K-12. Jamal Bowman came into that room late, made a huge ruckus coming in. And then all he talked about was how Black Americans have been discriminated against and deserve reparations. And we're like, you're in the wrong meeting, dude.
And then probably gone. And then I hear from Democrats in my local area that basically giving me shade for doing what I did. In order to make sure that DePaul University was investigated properly, and that the right things kind of got to the table in a public way.
How'd that make you feel?
It's totally messed up. Like we only have so many tools at our disposal, and right now the Republicans are the ones that are going to take this on. And as much as everybody uses us, we should be able to use them back for the things that are good for our community. And that's just the way the world works. And we can all be disappointed about that, but that's just like we got to do what we got to
Right.
do for the protection of our people.
It's the chair of a committee is the person who can put something on the agenda. So
Right.
if I have to meet with a Republican chair or a Democratic chair to get something off the agenda, that's who I'm going to meet with. And if I had a relative give me so much crap for meeting with Virginia Fox to get this meeting on the agenda in that session, and I was like, that's who you have to meet with. The only person who can put that hearing on the agenda is her. I don't care about anything else she stands for except for standing with Jews against anti-Semitism in K-12. That's all I care about. PeerK12 is nonpartisan. We also are a 501c3. We do not endorse candidates. We will meet with anybody who is willing to stand with us. And so one of the things that we are also doing is we are putting out questionnaires to candidates who are running for school board, asking them a plethora of questions. And so we're getting position papers from candidates who are running from school boards so that we can understand where they stand on the topics that matter to us. And it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's also about merit-based education. It's about our values. And so where do you stand on these topics? And we want to know. And again, we're not endorsing, but what we're doing is we are bringing their stances public so that the public can make an educated decision when they go on election day to vote. One of the other things that was really interesting in regards to the Jewish organizations locally and statewide is the assembly bills recently. So AB 1468 was the ethnic studies bill that was brought forth by JPAC, which is the California Jewish Public Affairs Caucus, and our Jewish Legislative Caucus. And it was then, it was championed as the only bill for this session. And then all of a sudden it disappeared and became AB 715, which is an anti-Semitism in K-12 bill. PeerK12, we did come out against 1468. And that was
we highlighted all of the issues with it,
Right.
I mean.
But I want to say that was an interesting, a very quick way to highlight where we differentiate from the legacy orgs. We do not believe that there is a saving grace to ethnic studies. And the legacy orgs still believe that there is good ethnic studies. Ethnic studies at its core is rotten. It was created to be rotten. And we know that, and we can prove it. And the legacy orgs are still out there saying that there's something salvageable there. And so that...
And just to be clear, like, you guys believe that because the way that ethnic studies is set up, it's really to indoctrinate people into a different value system. That's not to say that we shouldn't
do that.
And that's not to say that we shouldn't be teaching history from a minority perspective in this country, but that we should do that in our history classes. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make
Actually,
that super clear.
If you teach 100%, and if you are teaching real history, factual history, not through a lens, you by definition are going to be telling the real stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, all the things that happen to everybody here in this country, even before it was a country. And I think one of the worst parts about ethnic studies is that it does not teach how different ethnic minorities, because it's not about ethnicity, it's about systems of power and oppression and changing the value system. It doesn't talk about there were bad things that happened, and here's how the country dealt with it, and here's what was done. I mean, when you're talking about the Civil War,
and here's
in this
why
country,
our founding principles helped us get through this and create a better society. Yeah.
you're identifying the problem and who's to blame, and then you're stopping there. And when you teach real history in history class, it doesn't stop there. It goes on to say, and here's what happened next. And you give the facts and you can create conversations about that. But the problem is that anytime you're teaching anything through the lens of quote unquote, that in my mind is automatically disqualified. That is not education. That is opinion. That is, indoctrination. That is pedagogy that has one goal only. So you're right. But I guess that's what's so confusing for not just Jewish Americans. When we hear ethnic studies, that resonates with us because we're like, oh, our stories are finally going to be told. I never.
It always sounds good.
Yeah, I never saw myself, in any of my curriculum as a kid, but I learned about the horrors of slavery. I also learned about how this country went to war with itself to resolve that evil. And we came out, not perfect, but it was abolished. And it still took another 100 years for other injustices to be dealt with. But they're being dealt with. So the expectation of perfection, or, it's like you either be perfect or you're nothing. Every time you have that conversation, the answer is going to be, well, it's got to be nothing. And that's the point of ethnic studies, to dismantle Western civilization, period.
So how does 1468 turn into 715, and what is that?
Well, so with 1468, I want to say the reason, you asked about the divide between where we are or the divide or the not divide.
There's a divide.
So we were not, the grassroots orgs up and down California were not included in the discussion about 1468. Why were we against 1468? They wanted to create standards for ethnic studies, which would elevate ethnic studies to the same level as English, math, science, history, which then makes it the next step is now a requirement to get in. If it's now a standard, it has a standard, it's a graduation requirement, it now becomes a requirement to get into the UCs and the CSUs, which now no longer is just California, but it is now nationwide, global, and even worldwide to get into the UCs and the CSUs. California's test scores are abysmal. So why are we putting so much emphasis on ethnic studies and not into getting our other test scores up of just graduation rates of reading and math? And
how did it become 715?
So all of the ethnic caucuses and the teachers union came out against 1468. Teachers union came out, they didn't like the transparency part of it, that they would have to be transparent with the curriculum. So 1468 was killed, and all of a sudden 715 came out, which we were not opposed to. We are still not necessarily opposed to it. The session ends on September 12th. Today is September 4th. I don't know what day this podcast is going to get published. So I just want to be clear that today's September 4th that we're taping this. The session ends September 12th. The text has not yet been published. The California Teachers Association has come out against 715. They do not believe that Jewish children deserve their own assembly bill to protect them against anti-Semitism, because they say that nobody else has such a bill, which is not true. The ethnic caucuses are now with this. They are standing with the Jewish caucus. The Jewish caucus is negotiating, which incenses me. Like, we're negotiating my children's civil rights. I have seen a draft. It's bothersome. We don't know what the language is that's going to be published. Again, we have a week before the session ends, and it has to be on the governor's desk.
However,
right,
the entire legacy Jewish organization ecosystem in California is
pushing
sending
the entire Jewish community
to support something that we don't know what it says.
We don't know what it says. And
Do they know?
They don't know. No one knows. And they are pushing, I mean, they're paying influencers to post, to tell people to call their assembly members and their state senators to
rally for this bill.
It is the only bill that the Jewish caucus has as their priority bill for this session. We believe that a weak bill is going to be more dangerous than no bill at all. We are not coming out in opposition because we don't know what's in it. But we do ask that, hey, maybe let's take a pause and take some time. And maybe let's just wait till next session and do it right. Maybe do something similar to what's happening in Massachusetts, where you have hearings. You know what they haven't done? They haven't listened to the students. They haven't heard the students talk about what the students have experienced. And they're listening to the head of the Teachers Association say that there's no anti-Semitism when I have dozens, hundreds of Jewish teachers saying, wait a second, yes, there has been anti-Semitism. Why aren't you listening to the Jews speak for themselves and tell you what's really going on? That's not happening. Stop speaking for us. Stop. The Jewish legacy orgs are speaking for the entirety of the state, and they're not listening to the parents and the teachers and the students. And that's got to stop. And I'm like shaking right now. You can see I'm like turning splotchy because it makes me so mad. I'm tired of it. And so that's what we're doing is Nicole and I are working day and night to try to get their voices to be heard. And we're working with grassroots orgs up and down the state to try to work and get the attention of our elected officials, our assembly members and our state senators to say, this is happening. I know you've got more influential legacy orgs that you listen to on it, like, because, you know, for whatever reason, you've got donors that are in both sides in your ears, but we're the parents on the ground. Listen to us. Please take a beat. You don't have to rush this through. Let's do it right.
Yeah, I think that this is a tendency now because we're such a small community to say, well, if we expose this and we let it be out there for too long, the opposition's going to come, they're going to poke all these holes into it, and then we're stuck. But that's just not how this is supposed to work.
Liberated ethnic studies have come out against it. Right. Well,
that's not how policy, yeah. Go ahead.
Liberated Ethnic Studies and the Teachers Union together has come out against this bill. Now, what is going to happen? The next session, they're going to have an Islamophobia in K-12 bill that's going to include anti-Palestinian racism. And if we don't include everything that we need to include in 715, and they include APR, then we are now not going to be able to defend Israel's existence without being called racists.
Well, I mean, they're touting.
They're touting.
Right, but like, you know, by code.
Right. But they're touting that they're touting that it's a good thing that there's no definition of anti-Semitism in 715.
The Jewish organizations. I mean, this is what is so we're so flustered, both of us, because we're just dealing with these issues. Is like, I want to tear my hair out. And, you know, I have to tell you, like, aside from the fact of not being able to properly mourn October 7th, I don't know, Tamar, maybe you felt this as well, but like, I feel serious trauma caused to me by the reaction from our own community against the Jewish parents who are willing to kind of stand up and push back on all of these bad things happening. Like, instead of, you know, and it's not necessarily that I want them to, you know, be our cheerleaders and rah in public or whatever, but it's like, at least don't put additional hurdles. You know, I feel like on some level we're tied down with an anchor because of this, but then we're also expected to jump over the hurdle. And, you know, there have been such horrible things said about the two of us and actually any Jewish parent who has the audacity to go out and advocate for themselves and their children's, not under the purview and, the exact messaging that some of the big legacy orgs want you to have. And, Tamar's like passion and frustration is so visceral because it's like we have a hard enough time dealing with this stuff as it is to have our own community, really knocking us down every chance they get it's devastating from an emotional, mental perspective.
It's like censorship through social pressure. And it's really having political consequences. So
Huge.
in Philadelphia, they are teaching this stuff in history class, and it's been exposed, and it's America's irredeemably racist. We need to replace the national anthem. What should we do? We're playing games that are talking about resisting and revolting against capitalism in favor of Marxism. And we have a Democratic governor who's a Jewish governor who, because I think of these social pressures and that we put on, especially on that side of the political aisle, he's not able to stand up strongly and say, this that's going on in my party is not right, and I'm going to take a stand against that. And it's having, that's the political consequence we're having. I do think, though, like Richie Torres, like John Fetterman, if we have people, if Josh Shapiro gets the chutzpah to say this shouldn't be happening in Philadelphia schools, it will actually help him. But we have created, I think, this pressure to not do that in order to not upset not only the very loud part of the spectrum that really are anti-capitalist and do agree with these things, but the side that really just wants to say, let's not make the waters rough in our side. Let's just focus on the other side because they're the problem and there's nothing going on over here. It's really constraining us from doing anything. And I feel like we're getting the brunt of it because we're the ones that are going out there and actually saying something regardless of the politicization of it. And then we're just getting framed as whatever the heck they want to make themselves feel better about really just a situation at status quo that is going to be, I think it's combustible. It's just going to combust. It's going to be a problem.
I mean, it's one of the oldest, I guess, issues that Jews have experienced. You don't want to go against, I think in the olden days, right, you were after the exile of the Jewish people from Judea, our indigenous homeland, you had a situation where Jews were living in host countries, right? And so you have to be very careful. I don't think most people know, or even most Jewish people know, that in the host countries, we didn't have rights. We didn't have a say. We didn't have a vote. We weren't even citizens in many, many cases. And so America was really, the United States of America, the reason why Jews are so successful here and have always been successful is because it's built on this Judeo-Christian value of, you're part of a society. You as an individual bring enormous value to the greater good of the community. And those two things are held in high regard, both of them. Freedom of expression, of religion, of ideas, as long as you are following the laws, like don't steal, don't cheat, don't whatever, which also comes from Jewish values and Jewish 10 Commandments. That's why we've thrived here. But when the entire system changes and starts to value the opposite, where are we going to go? Now, Josh Shapiro, I know lots of people think that he's amazing, but it doesn't matter because his entire campaign was funded by the teacher union. And they had a lawsuit about money laundering between teacher union and his campaign. You've got Pritzker, they're all, go look at who their biggest donors are. You're going to always find this the same common denominator. And what I always find so interesting is this idea of oppressor versus oppressed and systems of power. Actually, there is a system of power and there are people being oppressed, but it's not who you think and not by who you think it is. It's the teacher unions, the political elite, which, by the way, a lot of the Jewish community feels like they are part of that political elite, having been, such a big part of the Jewish or the Democratic Party. Jewish donors are very front and center, but they've sort of lost their focus on the policy and the community. And, what does it mean to be Jewish in America? I don't think should be any different from what it means to be Black in America, right? Or Asian, or, straight or gay or bi, or I don't care about any of that stuff. If you are a good person, if you work hard, and if you are a helper, then you will thrive in this society that they are desperately trying to change. And I don't know, I think if the Jewish community and the Black community and the Asian community, the Mexican community, the Italian community, the Irish, at the core, we're Americans. And the reason we're all here is because we share these values of work hard and do well and provide a better life for your kids. If in 10 years, that's not the value system of this country, I mean, I'm sort of tearing up thinking about it. Are we really going to let this happen?
Right. Nicole,
are we really going to let this happen?
What is our backup plan? What is our backup plan when this country, obviously we both have citizenship to another wonderful democratic country. Hopefully we'll also remain democratic. But, there are people that seem to be very successful in undoing the beautiful things about this country, why everybody wants to come here. But I think that one of the things that we did forget, though, is that, yes, we came here to be American citizens, but we also, I think part of it is that we also need to have that Jewish pride. And I think there was a little bit, maybe too much assimilation, and there was too much of wanting to fit in that we forgot. And maybe there was the emphasis on pro-Israel, but not the local Jewish pride. And I don't necessarily want my kids to have to go to a Jewish day school and not be at public school. Part of that is, for many factors, but one of that is that we need Jewish representation at public school. One of the things that they wanted to put in 715 was that they wanted to say that a Jewish student had to be present to witness the anti-Semitism and report it and prove harm in order for it to be a problem. That was one of the things they want to put in 715. Now,
good luck with that.
It was the most recent draft I saw that was struck out, that a Jewish student does not have to be present. Anybody can report it. They don't have to prove harm. But I don't know if that's going to stay or not. But could you imagine? So anti-Semitism being taught or occurring from another student is okay if there's no one Jewish present.
Yeah, it's just if this was a gay person or a Black person, it's just insane. But that falls on deaf ears all the time.
Right. But Josh, here's the thing. We're not asking for special protection. We're asking for equal protection. We're not asking for anything special. We're just asking for the same protection that anybody else gets and deserves. That's it.
Exactly. But that's the change in the value system, right? That's it.
It is. Now, I think, to kind of, I guess, bring this back, full circle.
Yeah, and then I'll have one more question I want to close up. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. The whack-a-mole that before October 7th, we were desperately trying to show people what was happening, because we really felt, if more people saw this, they couldn't unsee it, which is, what happened to us. And then we saw it, we knew, and you can't just kind of go back. It was very, very hard to get people engaged in talking about this because most people didn't want to get involved. I think a lot of people are very hesitant about, sticking their neck out, or, something I've heard more often than I can count is, I hate politics, I hate politics. Say that again, because getting engaged in politics in the political process is the only way to fix this. It will not get fixed in any other way. And that means we need to start engaging in the political process as Jews, not as Jewish Republicans, not as Jewish Democrats, but as Jews.
And that starts with the school board.
It starts, there's that saying, all politics is local. There's a reason that's a big saying, right? It is. But there's the local piece to it, the school district, then there's a state, and then there's a federal, and there's different layers of where those intersect. And you do kind of need to be spinning all three of those. Actually, I would say four, because you've got the city politics as well. You got to be spinning 4 plates simultaneously. Okay. And that's overwhelming. And so the best thing to do is that we do need to have some sort of a cohesive strategy. And if there are, listeners out there who want to get on board with this, please get in touch with us, with Josh, with NAVI, with PeerK, with any of our partners. Like, we have to start working together and rowing this boat in the same direction. And we have to start getting in front of candidates and politicians and advocating for ourselves at the political level. There are very few Americans, people who hold political office, who have the ability to vote on these things, all these different bills and things that we're seeing and whatever it's happening in school districts. It doesn't matter what you feel about politics. It only matters what they think about us. And they need to know us. They need to understand us. They need to hear us. And if you are shying away from those conversations, please do not be surprised when you're discriminated against, when your issue isn't taken up. Because if you're not there to advocate, why would they?
Yeah. So you've said a lot. You've given a lot of advice to our Jewish community, Nicole and Tamar. Let's say we have a parent who's just sort of at that point where they're saying, I got to do something about this. What steps should they take? What advice would you give? And then I'd give you another one for non-Jewish parents. Is that the same advice? Is it different?
Are we talking local? I guess I need to, if they're just reaching out and they want to get involved. Yeah.
I mean, look, they have kids in school. They see this as a problem. I got to start doing something about it. I'm not sure how much time I have, but I need to understand what should I do?
Yeah. So typically what we'll do is we'll figure out, where are you? Well, if we have parent groups in their area, we'll connect them with their parent groups in their area. If they have an actual issue, then again, where area are they in? And we try to arm them with the tools, with the ed code in their area. We will maybe help them draft an initial letter to their teacher, principal, school board, superintendent, if it has to do with lawfare and ed code, and help them get started. It really depends. We take the time and we listen to them. A lot of parents really just need to be heard. And we try to give them that time. There are just 2 of us. So we do try to disseminate. 2
superheroes, though. Like,
thank you. But we try to disseminate and delegate. So there are the great thing, the silver lining, I hate to say, of October 7th was that there were parent groups across the country that popped up, and we are in touch with most of them. And so when parents reach out to us, if they're coming from somewhere across the country, we will connect them with their parent group. But we also make sure that they would do it the PeerK12 way, because we have case studies, we have proof points, and we want to make sure that they're getting the accountability that they deserve. If they want to work with us, then of course we find, things that they can do, because we're always looking for people to help us out. Whatever people, if they want to get some unpaid volunteer work and just work with us and learn the ways, we are happy to accept that.
Yeah, I one thing that I will add to that is something I try to tell parents who any kind of situation that they're in is that they really need to come to terms with the political nature of this problem. And as uncomfortable as that is, they need to realize that there is no amount of Holocaust education or anti-bias training that will fix this. It's not going to work. It hasn't worked. I really wish that all of the people who have the means, to donate to these big legacy orgs, I urge you to start having conversations with your local chapters of those legacy orgs about what has worked in the past versus what hasn't, and to just really take stock of where that money is going. And, what's hard about this is getting legacy orgs to realize that the grassroots orgs, the parent orgs across all these districts, across all these cities and all the states are not the enemy. We are the army. And we are the intel, and we are the secret weapon that has the personal relationships in our schools with our teachers and our principals and our superintendents to actually bring positive change. And I mean, my advice really is to stop seeing all of this that's going on as like an internal struggle or, oh, it's because the Trump administration, No, it's not. And it's a really tall order, I have to say. It is very hard to suddenly change how you view partisan politics in this country. I totally get that. But if you don't start to change how you view partisan politics in this country, this is going to get worse. And it's going to get worse at an exponential rate that I think shocked even Tamar and I. Like, we knew what was going to happen the next day after October 7th. But I think even I was shocked at just how quickly the whole entire world at every level and layer.
Jewish, non-Jewish parents, really quick. Start paying attention to your children's curriculum. Start paying attention to your school board meetings. The agendas are public. The minutes are public. Start attending the school board meetings. Start going to your school site council meetings. Just start getting involved. Do what you can. I know everybody's super busy. Do what you can, but really I would say, like, a lot of teachers are using Google Classroom or whatever, Power School, whatever they're using. Do what you can to stay engaged in what your students are learning, and pay attention. My kid came back with his ninth grade, whatever, and sixth grade, their civilization history textbooks. I went through real quick. I made sure that it was going to be taught, at least from the textbook point of view, in the right way. And go through and just make sure that your kids are, at least from what you can see, and then talk to your students about the things that they might be hearing. And if they hear certain words that they need to tell you, educate your kids as best you can for what they need to be listening for and what they need to report back to you. And at a minimum, do those. And of course, NAVI is going to be has a back to school series. Tune into those. And there's more resources and tools in those series.
I think what both of you said is really important. First, make sure you get involved in your kids' classwork and curricula. And by the way, if you're not able to, that's the first step. Make sure that your district is being transparent and gives you as a parent transparency to understand what's going on to a certain extent in the classroom. And Nicole, like, to what you're saying, we got to stop seeing this as a left or right or Republican or Democrat thing. This is about humanity, nothing else, just humanity. If we see each other's shared humanity, we can solve these problems. But if we riddle it with what the Democrats are doing or what the right's doing or Trump or Bernie Sanders, like, it's not going to work. So
the other, right? Like, you're just feeding into the ideology that is fueling this. Like, this is a battle between good and evil. If you need to have a dichotomy here, or like, a bad guy and a good guy, there's evil at play, and the good people of this world have got to wake up and push back.
And I have as my guests two of the best people in the world, Tamar and Nicole. I cannot even tell you how much I value your work. There are so many people out here that owe you a debt of gratitude, and they don't even know it. And maybe someday they will. But keep up the good fight. Of all the people that I've met in this space over the last, I don't even know how long it is. We're all like in a time warp, I feel like. you all have produced the most actual results, the actual wins. So if you're looking to get involved and you want some really good guidance, Tamar and Nicole, they're the women to go to. So thank you very much for being my guests. I'll look forward to seeing what happens with AB 715. And I'm sure we'll talk soon, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Sounds good.
Thank you for watching. If you like the podcast and wish to support our work, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media channels at NAVI Values.